For directors and senior managers, it is essential to have an understanding of your roles and responsibilities in enabling governance. For board members, knowing how to plan for and maintain governance policies and procedures is fundamental to managing risk and to protecting the organization's reputation. In this first lesson, you will learn about the core principles of effective corporate governance. The World Bank and United Nations have identified 8 principles which underpin every system of governance. These include transparency, rule of law, participation, responsiveness, equity, efficiency and effectiveness, sustainability, and accountability. Let's look briefly at each of these in turn. Transparency, as a principle, necessitates that information is freely available and directly accessible to those who will be affected by such decisions and their enforcement. Transparency is of particular importance to external users of such information, as these users lack the background details and knowledge available to internal users of such information. Equally, therefore, the decisions which are taken and their enforcement must be done in a manner that follows rules and regulations. Transparency, therefore, can be seen to be a part of the process of recognition of responsibility by the organization for the external effects of its actions, and equally, part of the process of redistributing power more equitably to all stakeholders. Any kind of privileged information, or that which would breach legal, commercial, security or personal privacy obligations, should not be considered as requiring to be transparent. However, it is also important for citizens and civil society organizations to have public information available, so that they can ask questions, raise issues, and if needed challenge the information itself. Therefore, an enterprise should reveal information related to such matters as its objectives, missions and visions, relationships and authorities, responsibilities, revenues, and its rules and standards. The second principle is the rule of law. This is a corollary of the transparency principle. It is apparent that good governance requires a fair framework of rules of operation. Moreover, these rules must be enforced impartially, without regard for power relationships. Thus, the rights of minorities must be protected. Additionally, there must be appeal to an independent body, as a means of conflict resolution, and this right of appeal must be known to all stakeholders. This means that an enterprise should obey all the related rules and regulations already in force in the community. The scale of this community depends on the diversity and breadth of a company's activities. So, it can be a district, a city, a region, a country or the world. Although very easy to say, this is actually a very disputable principle. In most organizations, not all the regulations already devised and in force will conform to the requirements of good governance, and will need to be reviewed at regular intervals. The third principle is participation. Although participation by all stakeholders is of course desirable, this is not an essential principle of good governance. The ability of all to participate if so desired is, however, an essential principle. Participation, of course, includes the freedom of association and of expression that goes along with this. Depending upon the size and structure of the organization, participation can be either direct or through legitimate intermediate institutions or representatives, as in the case of a national government. Participation, of course, would involve everyone, or at least all adults, both male and female. Responsiveness is a corollary of the participation principle and the transparency principle. Responsiveness implies that the governance regulations enable the institutions and processes of governance to be able to serve all stakeholders within a reasonable time frame. The next principle is equity. This principle involves ensuring that all members of society feel that they have a stake in it, and do not feel excluded from the mainstream. This particularly applies to ensuring that the views of minorities are taken into account, and that the voices of the most vulnerable in society are heard in decision-making. This requires mechanisms to ensure that all stakeholder groups have the opportunity to maintain or improve their well-being. The sixth principle of governance is efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency implies the transaction cost minimization, whereas effectiveness must be interpreted in the context of achievement of the desired purpose. Thus, for effectiveness, it is necessary that the processes and institutions produce results that meet the needs of the organization, while making the best use of resources at their disposal. Naturally, this also means sustainable use of natural resources and the protection of the environment. Sustainability requires a long-term perspective for human development and how to achieve the goals of such development. Today, it is widely recognized that the activities of an organization impact upon the external environment. These other stakeholders have not just an interest in the activities of the organization, but also a degree of influence over the shaping of those activities. Central to this is a concern for the future, which has become manifest through the term sustainability. This term sustainability has become ubiquitous, both within the discourse of globalization and within the discourse of corporate performance. Sustainability is of course a controversial issue, and there are many definitions of what is meant by the term. The final core principle of effective governance is accountability. Accountability is concerned with an organization recognizing that its actions affect the external environment, and therefore assuming responsibility for the effects of its actions. This concept, therefore, implies a recognition that the organization is part of a wider societal network and has responsibilities to all of that network, rather than just to the owners of the organization. Alongside this acceptance of responsibility, therefore, must be a recognition that those external stakeholders have the power to affect the way in which those actions of the organization are taken. They may also need a role in deciding whether or not such actions can be justified, and if so, at what cost to the organization and to other stakeholders. According to ISO 26000, accountability is the state of being answerable for decisions and activities to the organization's governing bodies, legal authorities, and more broadly, its stakeholders. To make it more clear, to be accountable means to provide proof, for example, reports, on what you are responsible for. Accountability explains that a company is not isolated from its environment, and that it is a part of a wider societal network, and has responsibilities to all of that network, rather than just to the owners of the organization. A company has to be accountable both for the consequences of its activities, and also for not repeating any negative activity. So, it follows from the principle of transparency, in that transparency needs to reveal relevant information to stakeholders, and accountability is the means to reveal such information. There has not been a consensus generally on how to deal with this necessity. Is it always possible to rely on a company's self-declaration? Or should there be third parties to scrutinize, on behalf of all the stakeholders? The reluctance of some countries representing their national industries and companies to respect principles of social responsibility, including accountability, and the efforts to lobby against an international standard, has impacted the strength of such a document to be implemented. This fact is observable in different parts of ISO 26000. In this lesson, we have briefly examined the 8 principles which underpin every system of governance, including transparency, rule of law, participation, responsiveness, equity, efficiency and effectiveness, sustainability, and accountability. In the lessons which follow, we will examine how these principles can be implemented within organizations. Want to learn more about this subject? Then click on our website to view the full course. Why not subscribe and get access to free articles and special offers? Join the Global Career Highway now.